So, hello. Uh, there's a slight change of plans compared to what we had planned. We had planned an interview with Leonard from Spontaneous Miracles, but unfortunately, his mom got really sick, and she's in the hospital, and he's in the hospital with her. So we had to change the plans, and instead of him interviewing me, we are postponing that to a later point. And the topic that we're going to talk about, at a later point. But since I know that there are some people sitting and waiting, I thought that I would do a live recording myself. And if you have any questions, please write me, and then I'm going to see if I can figure it out. It's like the first time I'm doing this, so I'm a little bit not sure if it works and if the mic works and everything. But let's see how it is. So the topic I decided to talk about is um, is actually because of a question that I had earlier today, and it's why is it even relevant to talk about biochemistry when we talk about non-duality? Because non-duality is all about that none of this is real, um, that everything that I perceive as me is not real. I'm not real, and I do see that when we talk about non-duality, on that level, then there's nothing to talk about because we just are. So all of this is an illusion. Completely correct. Um, why I sit here and perceive me as myself and in my house, and it's daylight, and I'm wearing a shirt and all of that is not real. It's just a perception of a reality, and that's what we talk about when we talk non-duality. The the someone believing itself to exist as me is a gathering of sensory experiences. All of us have a perception of reality through our sensory experiences. So it's through what we can see, what we can hear, what we can smell and taste and touch, and then all that information get gathered in the brain, and the brain creates a meaning with all that information. So if you see a strawberry for the first time, you have no opinion or meaning about it whatsoever. You smell it, that will form an opinion whether you like it or do not like it. You taste it, and that will form another opinion. So next time when you see a strawberry, you don't even need to touch it or pick it up or smell it or taste it. You know already what it is. That's how the brain works. In that creation of all that information and forming an opinion, the someone believing itself to exist is taking place. That's where the I is created, which means that, as you see, there is no I. There's just a gathering of sensory experiences connected with a meaning of what I have experienced in the past. So that's basically why when we talk about non-duality, we can't really use the words I, and we can't use this meat suit, our biology, as a reference for anything, because it's not real. It's just a collection of sensory experiences. Where I think that biochemistry is relevant when we talk about non-duality is that, yes, all of this is an illusion, but the biochemistry that happens when I see somebody I like and I give them a hug, then I free hormones that immediately gives me a sensation of being connected and being loved and having a place in life. If I see somebody that I don't like, then because of all the connections that is happening, the biochemistry that is released in this meat suit is going to have feelings of anger or annoyance or wanting to start a fight or something. And even though I know that it's not true, I still think it's relevant to talk about. And the reason why I find it relevant is that however we perceive our reality is shaping our reality. Or you don't have a single thought, and you haven't got a single feeling or single emotion, a single creation of a memory. You haven't, that doesn't exist without chemistry. Everything this meat suit is experiencing, all the sensory experiences that I have, all of it, everything that I can, if I sit down and tell you the story of my life, or tell you about a dream I had yesterday, or tell you about a movie or so, all of that can only take place because of chemistry. However, chemistry can be regulated, which means that our perception of reality can change immediately, and you can try that afterwards. You can sit and you can look at any 3D object that you have, and then you sit, and when you look long enough, all of a sudden it doesn't appear 3D anymore. All of a sudden it turns 2D, which means that you can't even trust your eyesight. It's the same with those optic illusions. You know, the oldest one is the one with the duck and the bunny, the rabbit. And when you look at it, you can't see the duck and the rabbit at the same time. You can focus on either. You can't see both at the same time. And that doesn't mean that when you can see the duck, the bunny disappears, or when you can see the bunny, the duck disappears. It just means that the brain can't comprehend both. And it's a super good example of what non-duality actually is, because that is it, you know? That is one of the proofs that none of it is real. That is only a perception of reality. But the chemistry is shaping us. The chemistry that we releases is shaping us. It's shaping our, for example, everybody that is sitting and listening now, or is going to see this video later on, everybody that are seekers, if I can say it like that, that is trying to figure all this out and are watching videos and listening to audiobooks and reading books and doing meditations and cold baths and green smoothies and all of that. All of you seekers out there, you have, to kind of like make it very basic, you have the same biochemistry, all of you, because you have a curiosity that is driven, and that drive, that drivenness that you have is created by dopamine. And dopamine is creating that drive in all of us. It's the same for all of us, in all living beings. Dopamine is the hormone that is creating that drive. So every single seeker has a specific release of dopamine for this to happen. Every single troll out there that is sitting and watching this and might be writing stuff in the comment section, you have a very, very specific chemical pattern as well. The way that you perceive reality and the way that you respond to reality is very unique for all trolls. So all you trolls, you have the same chemistry. By looking at how you write, by looking at how you interact with people, without even knowing you can very easily be put into a box. Just like the seeker very easily can be recognized and put into a box. So even though it's not real, even though it's just an illusion, we still have some common things when it comes to chemistry. And that's why I think it's very important to be aware of it. I've made a very long, very, very long talk. I answered a question and it turned into a very, very long talk, which is on my channel. And then I have made like small, bite size of it, because I realized that it was very much a lot. In that I talk about that our perception of reality is split into two, and it is. We have two different types of nervous system, and we have two different ways of being in the world. When you are in the illusion of the world, and yes, I know it's not real, and we don't have to do that again. So when we are in the illusion of our reality, when our perception of reality is in this illusion, everything is always dual. That's why we talk about non-duality, which is the non-dual. But in the illusion, everything is dual, because we are connected with the meatsuit, and we have a biology all of a sudden, and we have impermanence, we have everything, cells decay, you are going to get sick, you are going to get old, and you are going to die. That is connected with the meatsuit and with the duality. So there you have the being alive or being dead. In non-duality, that time doesn't exist, and it's immortality, because there's no one not to exist, or anyone to exist. But that's another talk. I want to stay in the illusion first. Let's stay in the illusion first, because there's so many speakers that talk about the non-duality experience of it, where there is no one. So I'm going to leave that to them, and instead I'm going to talk about the biochemistry of the illusion, because that can be shaped. The one that is sitting and being a troll right now can be shaped into be a seeker, and a seeker can be shaped into not seeking anymore. A seeker can never find. I have to say that a seeker can never find, because the job of a seeker is to seek. So a seeker can never find. But I think it's also very important to note that every single non-duality teacher out there, every single one of them, without any exception, all of them have been seekers at some point. And I'm not saying that by seeking you will find, because you can't. The seeker will keep seeking, But we have something in the brain called neuroplasticity. And that is where, yes, we might have this template that was shaped while we were babies. We have what is called mirror neurons in the brain, that when we're babies, if you look at a baby and you open your mouth and you open your eyes, the baby will open its mouth and open its eyes. It's copying exactly what you're doing. And there are some super, super interesting studies about how the baby connects to its caregiver, to its primary caregiver. It could be the mother, the father, or an adopted parent, or whatever. But the primary caregiver, the neurons and the whole biochemical and neurochemical pattern that the primary caregiver has, the baby copies, which means that the baby is not creating it itself, it's just copying what the parent has. So if the mom is, or the dad, or whoever is the primary caregiver, is stressed and scared, and has that entire neurochemistry, entire biochemistry, is all the chemicals of being stressed and being concerned and being, the baby will automatically copy that and create exactly the same in the little body. If the primary caregiver is loving and compassionate and kind and completely calm, the baby will copy that. That in itself is not really a problem. The problem is that it doesn't really change. Whatever you copied when you were a baby, it's never really going to change. It can only change by awareness, by you being aware of what happened. And that's why trauma work is so super, super important. And it's the only way for the troll, if I can say it like that, to actually release and change the pattern of the hormone, of the neurochemistry that the troll has. That can only happen through awareness, because you have a very, very innate template in you that you copied from your primary caregiver. And that template is what you're copying throughout your entire life, throughout every single partner you have chosen throughout your entire life. What attracts you and what revolts you is from that template that was created at a point that is no longer has anything to do with the person that we are. So that's just another proof that all this is just an illusion. You perceiving you as you, it's just an illusion. You thinking of your past, that past did not really happen because you perceived it through that filter that you had at that point. So you can think of anything that happened when you were, 5 years old, 7 years old, 3 years old. You can think of what happened that, and at that point, you had the brain of the 5-year-old, 3-year-old, 8 years old. You had that brain, and you had a perception of that brain, which means that you could only perceive and you could only understand from that level of understanding. But that doesn't change. You have probably noticed that when you grow up, you still have perceptions about how long the road was that you lived on. When you're an adult and you see the childhood road, it's much smaller, and you get all confused and like, oh my goodness, I thought it was much longer. I thought everything was much bigger. I thought everything, because that has not adapted, and that can only adapt with awareness, and that's why. Yes, none of this is true, and yes, all of this is just um, a perception. None of it is true, but it does not mean that it can't be painful. For example, if you have had trauma during your childhood, that's still painful. And if you keep telling yourself, well, I don't need to deal with that because it's not real, none of this is real. It's just something we believe to be real, then you're gaslighting yourself and you're spiritual bypassing yourself. And the danger with that is that you do not create a space for your neuroplasticity to actually work in your favor. And you do not create the space for your hormones, your neurochemicals, and your biochemicals in any way to change and start to work in your favor. And that's why I think it's very important to talk about. So, in this illusion that you have, in this perceived reality that you have, you're split in two. You have on one side a very contracting energy, which I will call the ego. I just call it that for, ease of conversation. And you have the expanding energy, which is the authentic. I call it the authentic. Again, we could call it whatever. I call it the authentic just to give an idea of what we're talking about. And it's a bit like yin and yang. Both of them are part of the illusion, so neither of them are real, and neither of them is better than the other one. They just are, and they're not, because they're not real. It's in the illusion. Anyways, those two different ones have different releases of hormones and chemicals. And those two different ones have completely opposite life views and have completely opposite perception of reality. The way they perceive what is said and done towards them, and the way they communicate and connect with other people, it's two completely different things. A lot of people that feel that they have experienced the falling away have actually just gone from the ego to the authentic, which is completely fine. I mean, there's nothing better or worse or preferably or anything to do one or the other. But a lot of people that see themselves as awake and aware and present, they have released the ego part of their lives and are more focused in the authentic part. As I said, I have made an audio about this already, which you can find. It's a very long one, and I have made the small bite-size about it as well. So I'm not going to go into the same things that I have talked about once. Instead, I'm going to say that you can see if you are locked into the ego by how you perceive the world, because the ego is very much obviously tied into time. As I talked about before, dopamine is tied into time. So the ego has a lot of striving and a lot of achieving, and in many ways have a really, really bad self-worth and very bad self-esteem, because it keeps proving that that it actually has worth. And why would you prove that if you know that you haven't? So the ego very often has a very low self-esteem, a low self-worth, and are trying to boost the dopamine to get things done, to sort things out. And so in its actions and the way that it perceives itself and it perceives other people is very much always in a comparison. I'm better than you. Oh, you don't know that. Well, I know that. Always trying to do the one up. And a very important thing about recognizing when you're in the ego is that there's always something out there that is going to be better than what you have right here. So you might be super, super stressed, and then you don't want to be stressed, so you look at what you can do to get there where you're not stressed. Or you have a situation where your mom is sick, or you are sick, or you don't have the work that you want, or you don't live in the place that you want to live in, and you have a focus on what's going on right here. You don't want that. You want that, the thing over there. As soon as you capture yourself in that, as soon as you become aware that you're sitting with something, I have this body, I want to be 10 pounds lighter. I have this education, I want to get to that. As soon as that happens, then you're locked in the ego. There's nothing wrong with being locked in the ego at all. It's not bad or anything. The problem with being locked into anything is that you will have a surplus of some chemicals and you will have a minus of other chemicals. And that is not sustainable at all. It will lead to a depletion at some point. And usually for the ego, what happens is that it gets an anxiety, it gets stress and depression, it gets a very dark life view, if I can say it like that. It can lose all faith in itself and in others. And that's where non-duality for some people starts to be interesting, because they don't want that. They want something else. It's just an extension of the ego issue that was there in the first place. And for them to do the spiritual bypassing, which happens, is to say that, well, this is not real anyway, so it doesn't really matter that I got an anxiety and I'm depressed and I don't have the life that I don't want, or I have a life that I don't want. It doesn't really matter because it's not really real. It's not real at all. What is over there, that's real. This is not real, so it doesn't really matter. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's exactly the same. It's just an extension of the ego that was already there. The only thing you can do the opposite you can do is to connect with what is. And I have talked about this extensively, and I'm going to keep repeating it. It's about the unconditional acceptance of what is. That you utterly accept the cards you're dealt. These are the cards you're dealt anyway. So let's say that you have an anxiety or you have depression and you don't want that. The only way to reach a point within you where that's okay is by having an unconditional acceptance of what already is. Which means I got an anxiety, I don't want an anxiety. Okay. Can I create a space in me where I create space for having an anxiety that I don't want to have? Yeah, I can create space for having what I don't want to have. I'm still not creating space for having an anxiety, but I'm creating space for not wanting an anxiety. Okay, can I create space that I'm trying to change me from actually what is into something that is not? Yes, I can create space for that. I'm not creating space for that I'm not who I want to be. I'm creating space for that I want to do something else. You see the difference? If you keep creating space for that, then you're no longer escaping, which means that you are actually staying in what is real. You're staying in what is happening, and that is calming your biochemistry. That is calming your neurochemistry and your hormones. And by calming that, you actually create the space where things can happen without you dictating how it needs to happen. So even though things are not the way that you want them to be, you can create space for how it actually is. It doesn't change anything, and it's not supposed to. It's not supposed to. It's an illusion anyway. So it's fine that it doesn't change anything. What it does change is your chemistry. It changes the way that you perceive yourself and the way that you perceive your life. It changed the spike of dopamine that you have and the low of serotonin that you have. It changed the baseline of both. And by doing that, you make no change whatsoever, and everything is going to be changed because your perception of reality is going to change. And that's why I think that biochemistry is important when we talk about non-duality, because you need to have a shift in your chemistry, um, and you need to work with the neuroplasticity in order to understand it at all. You're not just going to wake up one day and all of a sudden something completely different has happened, has changed. It's not how it works. And it's not that I'm sitting and saying that you should meditate daily and you should go for a run daily and you should have green smoothies and quit smoking and all of that. Not what I'm talking about. Who am I to know what works for you? I have no idea what works for you. I'm quite sure that you know what works for you. So I leave that to you completely. What I'm saying is that even though none of this is true, it can still be immensely painful. If I drink a glass of bleach, it is going to be immensely painful. If I'm robbing a bank, and get caught, there will be consequences. So even though none of this is real, the perception of it is real. In the illusion, I have to say, because the perception is not real either. But understand me here. If you want to see through and you want to let go, you need to work with your plasticity, with your neuroplasticity, because otherwise it's not going to happen. You're not going to be a troll today and then you wake up tomorrow morning and all of a sudden everything has fallen away. It can't happen. It can't happen. Nothing happens out of nothing. So I'm going to repeat what I said before, that every single non-duality teacher out there were seekers at some point. And I'm not saying that you should start to seek, because seeking is ego. That's, I am not, I should be. So the seeking is not what is doing it. What is doing it and what has done it for them on a chemical level is the neuroplasticity. It's the changing the template that they had, the neurological template that they had from being toddlers, babies and toddlers, and then they had changed that template shaped it into something which had the foundation where it was possible for everything to fall away. And how you're getting to that, I have no idea. I know that if you start to open up for an unconditional acceptance of what is, and that is the not changing anything, it's just accepting what already is, then you are creating a hormonal foundation where a falling away can actually happen, because it can't happen when you're stressed. When you are, trying not to drown, you don't need somebody saying, it's not real, it's just an illusion. That is not going to make you relax. So creating a biochemistry and a neurochemistry for yourself where you're not drowning, that's the first step. And you do that by unconditional acceptance. I think I'm gonna end the stream now because I have a tendency to talk a lot, and I rather want to make like small streams like this, and then you can write me questions, and then I'm gonna answer. But I hope this is I've got so many more things. I wrote some things I wanted to talk with Lennon about, but as soon as he's in a position where we can do the interview, then we're going to talk about that. But I hope this one helped you a little bit in understanding why, even though all of this is an illusion, why it's still important to create space for what is happening within the illusion. It doesn't make it real, and it doesn't make it better. I mean, if you choose not to, that's fine too. It's not real anyway. So it's about the creating space for unconditional acceptance, and by that creating a foundation where something new can happen, and your plasticity in the brain, the neuroplasticity, can change, and you actually can start to calm down in your hormones. You can raise your baseline of the different hormones, which is creating a calmer you. That's it. Thank you for today. Bye.